So if you hold Option Command, we can click hold and we can dynamically zoom our waveform or our audio so that we can have this fit to the screen however which way we want. Another thing that we can do is Shift Command. We can click, hold, and drag to reposition. Also, if you head to the Audio tab, if you want to make any adjustments to the actual vertical height of your waveforms, I typically like these to be somewhere where they're around the same size as the pitch block. This is something that we can do either with this slider or the same modifiers, Option Command. We can click, hold, and drag, and this will allow us to adjust the height. So generally what I do is I like to find a place that this kind of feels comfortable visually. At this point, I like to have it so that the average waveform kind of sits behind the pitch block in a top to bottom. What this allows you to do, it's a really good telltale for anything that's maybe needs to be adjusted in terms of level, they tend to pop out. So that's just a little kind of like a bonus tip. The pitch blocks are tied to the waveforms now. We used to have a waveform that was right across from left to right, and then the pitches were actually separate. They would kind of float on top of the screen, if you will, and they would be kind of like disconnected. These are called control points. If we hover our cursor in the middle, click, hold, and drag, we have the ability to adjust our level. And this is something that you can do kind of like while you're tuning. So I mentioned that for this section over here, if I wanted to be adjusting the level, because keep in mind, I'm looking at a consolidated performance here, but this might be something that has been comped together from 3 different takes or 4 different takes. So when we're playing, get a little drunk always, that note there, that pops out a little bit too much to me. It's very easy to just hover our mouse cursor, and also I'll just bring that down a couple dB. Anytime you want to have a quick before and after, the comma key, this will bypass everything. On the left side, we have drift. This is good for just kind of massaging a longer passage. You can see this pitch trace. We can kind of like smoothen this out and make this so that if it's tilted one way too much, and this is just from mouse hovering in this corner. If I hover my cursor, I can dial this all the way up to 100, or we can dial it all the way down to 0. Now, 0 would be no tuning applied whatsoever. And then if we dial this up to 100, this would be tuning this according to 100%. But keep in mind, this would be, if we were taking a first pass at a vocal, this would be according to like the nearest semitone in terms of where the actual vocal was performed. We can right click, and this is called the shaper tool. Once you have these points added, then we can adjust the actual pitch trace, and we can do this in kind of like a really smooth and transparent way. So if I wanted to not have to cut up this individual pitch trace or this pitch block into multiple pieces, then we can just add these points. And when we add these points, notice that it just kind of adds these nodes. Once we have these nodes in place, we can just massage everything into place. And also you can highlight across multiple nodes and hold the alter option modifier. And you can bring everything kind of up and down. You can click, hold, and drag any of these points. As long as you hold the alter option modifier, you can just reposition. And this gives you a really nice way to just be able to just massage different pitch traces back into sounding in tune when maybe you don't want to use the drift. And this can be used in a lot of different ways. We're going to take a look at different examples of this. Is this session recorded for later reference? Yes, it will be available for later reference. It will remain on the Synchro Arts YouTube channel if I call up the center notes tool. So the center notes tool, for example, we have, in addition to the correction amount, which we can slide up, we also have a drift, and the drift can be used to adjust pitch traces that are longer. The one thing I will say about the drift, though, is that it really kind of only makes sense on stuff that is long. You can really see those changes happening in real time. Sometimes if you're looking at something that's really short, it might not necessarily display that as easily. If I call up the B key and I wanted to create a match process, as we take these tracks, let's say, for example, this lead vocal, and I have this male vocal track, anytime that you call this up, it's automatically going to populate a guide track and a dub track. But if you're looking at anything where you're adding multiple instances of something, then these tracks will automatically disappear from the track section the minute you add them. Also, in terms of creating a process group, if you had multiple tracks before, you used to have to create multiple increments of different outputs. This is all done automatically, and now in terms of the output tracks are completely automatic. So we're going to see this in action kind of like in real time, but I did want to show this new process panel because it does make a huge difference. And Smart Pitch is a really interesting way that we have the ability to align to timing and pitch. There's a new mode that we have where we have the ability to open up the process panel, and this option right over here, the Smart Pitch mode, we have now match all to guide. This is pretty self-explanatory. It will 100% match everything to the guide. Then we have match unison only. So in the case where you had a harmony and you didn't want it tuned, You could say, well, if it's a unison, I want it to match the pitch, but if it's not, then I don't want it to be tuned. And then you have an option where you can match a unison and you can tune a non-unison. If I wanted to make any changes to this, notice that we have this cursor icon. I'll zoom in a little bit. Hopefully this comes across. You can see this cursor icon changes. When we have this icon, we can navigate to the outer region boundary of the pitch block, and then I can adjust this whole phrase. Everything that's before and after remains relevant or locked down. So we've just completely altered that timing. I'll undo that and I'll go back now the other way. I'm going to move this now this way. So we can pick a point of a phrase that we want to anchor down, and just by multi-selecting these, we can totally tweak and adjust the pocket. And the thing that I love about this is, in general, this is one of the things. So anytime, a simple timing change, if you highlight multiple pitch blocks and then you choose a point in terms of where you want that timing change to be applied, just click holding and dragging, you can adjust those and it ends up sounding really, really good. And then if you have 2 points where you have, like, for example, just 2 notes, if I made an adjustment here, then this would automatically just shift over. And if I make an adjustment to this one over here, it's going to be the same thing. But I would always recommend, if you're changing things and you want to have an anchor point, then you just highlight across these pitch blocks just like this. You make those adjustments. The other thing to mention is that anything that's an unpitched voicing, in terms of if you have sibilants or breaths or consonants or anything like that, that gets kind of left out or filtered out from the process. And if you hover your cursor here, notice that we also have the ability to adjust the level of this as well. So if I play this, that one, it stands out a little bit too much. I can click, hold, and drag to reposition this. And now notice that this actually turns down in terms of its level. Let's see what's going on here. That's the easiest and intuitive stretch feature. For me, it is, because the way I think about adjusting phrases, in terms of anytime I'm adjusting pocket, I think the first thing to point out is I'm never like doing anything crazy unless that is the intent. It's only going to be a small little tweak, pretty much the same way that I just made, and just saying to myself, right, this is the phrase I'm working with, and we need to make an adjustment on this section over here. I want to pull this back. Everything else needs to bend and move relative to everything. Then you just make that adjustment there. If I wanted this to stay exactly where it is, this to stay exactly where it is, and then I just wanted to adjust the phrasing of these 3, then I can kind of highlight these 3 points over here to lock them down, and then choose which point I want to make the timing adjustment. Or if I wanted to make it from the other side, like which would be over here, just push this over. This stuff is staying locked down. And you have so much control in terms of being able to adjust everything. I'm seeing some stuff here. The other thing is with respect to any time that you're doing these changes. I mentioned that we can hover our cursor and we have these 3 control points. In terms of being able to adjust sibilants and consonants, if I take a look at anything here, notice all of these little areas that have a little bit of a aqua blue highlighted area. You can see this one right over here. This is an unpitched voicing, which doesn't get altered if we adjust the tuning, but we have this level change, and I can either select it and then hover my cursor, or you don't even have to have it select. You can just adjust the actual level, and then it's going to adjust any sibilants or consonants. So I can just pull this down. If you kind of do this a lot, you can see visually how things are supposed to look. And then if I go to this section, it looks like we have an S and a T.
I have the guts to speak.
So I have the guts to. So we have like an S and then we have a T. And they're very loud. They're very bright.
I have the guts to speak.
So if I listen to both of these together, I could just hover my cursor, pull these down, and I'm doing this. I don't really have to change the view if I want to.
I have the guts to speak this out loud.
Okay, there's another one over here, so I can just zoom in, hover my cursor, pull this down a little bit. If you click the L key, then we have a completely separate view that allows us to have really detailed information about the levels. There's 2 different ways that it works. You can just click, hold, and drag. We get an audio preview, and I can click and we can see the amount of dB that actually decreases as we're doing that. And then another thing that's useful is holding Alt or Option. We can click and hold this and drag this down, and then this snaps in 3 dB increments. I always use 3 dB increments as kind of like a starting point for any sibilance adjustment. So because they're filtered out visually in a different color, I can just kind of shift through this just using my mouse scroll wheel. Here's a breath. Let's listen to it.
Loud,
so we hear this breath.
loud.
I'm going to just make a selection, and I can just pull this down. We'll go over here, double clicking to place my cursor, spacebar to play.
Loud.
So this one is like an H. I'll bring it down a little bit. Let's scroll over again, another breath.
Maybe.
This is the other thing, because they're filtered out visually so nicely, is that I don't necessarily have to waste a lot of time playing. And I can even make these level adjustments visually if I want to. So for this one, I can tell that's probably the same thing we had where we have the S followed by a T.
Just a shade.
Okay, this one is actually, we have levels too.
Maybe just a shade.
Okay, for these, I'm going to maybe potentially try pulling these down 6 dB. I'll hold Alt or Option. There's 3, there's 6. Let's have a listen.
Maybe just a shade.
Okay, I gave her a lisp. It's too much. Let's bring it back up a little bit.
Just a shade.
Okay, awesome. This one, let's go for 3. Alt or Option modifier, hold this.
Maybe just a shade.
Brilliant. Now I'm going to use the R key to zoom out a little bit, and we can click, hold, and drag to reposition. The other thing that we can do from within this view is we can make the level adjustments from within here. So if you'd rather have this view, which can be actually pretty useful in terms of seeing all this information, then you can simply highlight across these purple pitch blocks that are shown as purple in this case, and then I can click Alt or Option modifier, that's down 3 dB. I don't know if that's too much, but let's just back up a little bit. We'll give ourselves a bit of pre-roll and we'll have a listen.
Loud. Maybe just to share my feelings.
Okay, maybe I went a little bit too far. I never really see the goal of this as being to flatten something out completely. Certain things are going to be louder. Let's undo that and let's go down maybe 2 dB instead. So any one of these pitch blocks. And also you can just do it visually.
Maybe just to share my feelings.
Also, individually, this one over here, it's too loud. I can see that even visually, and I'm just going to pull this down a little bit.
Feelings. Maybe.
I'll click the L key to get out of the levels for a moment. Let's hop back in just for a moment into the timing. I could even continue adjusting those levels. I'll do that using the selector tool versus going in and going into the level selection. If you're adjusting timing of something, if you multi-select anything over here, this will anchor down everything. And then if we've tried to visualize this in terms of if these were warp points, if this was the old school way of doing it, we have a point here, we would have a point potentially here, and then we would have a point here. And then as we adjust this point here, everything gets stretched. So it gets time compressed from either the left to right based on the highlighted selection that we have. I'm hoping that I'm answering this question properly. But if I do this, it gets pushed, everything gets pushed over, but everything, the timing change, everything gets locked down, or rather all the timing changes they're relative from this point backwards and this point forward, because everything gets either pushed or pulled. If you wanted to omit something, if you only wanted a change to happen between 2 notes, then if you have these 2 notes selected and you make that adjustment, then everything else is staying in. Okay, so this one, too much. Alt or Option, down. Play.
They trying to reach your mind.
And I can also bring these down while everything's playing
They trying to
too.
reach your mind, but I gotta talk to you.
Okay, that one over there, this was too loud. They gotta talk to you.
Gotta talk to you.
Okay, both of these are too loud. I would Alt or Option to go down 3, Alt or Option to go down 3. And then if you have this option, I believe it is this one over here. If I played from here,
Gotta talk to you.
and then I made an adjustment, I don't always have to double click to bring myself back. If I press play, it's going to go back to that last spot.
Gotta talk to you.
If I click the comma key, which bypasses everything, this will now, we're going to hear the difference between the levels, we'll hear the difference between the sibilants popping out, and we'll hear the massive tuning changes in terms of the before of where we started with this vocal. We can hear these sibilants, they're really kind of being overcooked, and also these have quite a different level change. We made quite an adjustment, but it sounds really seamless now. We have tuning changes and level changes. I heard a little bit of something, an artifact here. Let's zoom in here.
Maybe it's part of,
Okay, I could either try to bring this down a lot.
maybe it's part of me.
Sometimes you just have a sibilant that is, it's got this weird sound. So it might require some tweaking in clip gain, like post-processing. It's something that I'll just make a mental note of and move on. Okay, this one over here, too loud. Again, Alt or Option, we'll bring that down.
Maybe it's part of me healing. Or maybe
This breath here, bring it down. Actually, this, I guess, would be a static level change that shows you the full amount that it's been turned down. And if you go to the level display, this one will show you the absolute values. It depends which view you're in, but you can work in both. This one over here, too loud. Again, Alt or Option. This, I love this 3 dB as a starting point. Anytime I make clip gain adjustments, it's usually between 2.5 and 4.5 dB. So 3 is kind of like a really good starting spot. Massive breath here. We hear that gasp. Let's bring this down.
someone I can keep.
And this one, too loud. Let's bring this down. We have also the levels that are kind of like really loud in this case. I could highlight all of these and bring them down. even visually. Here's a tip too. If the tuning preview is way too loud for you, especially when you're tuning things or dragging them, if you head down to the bottom, very bottom of I'm going to try to do a zoom, and I think it should come through in the live stream. You have master volume, but you also have tuning preview. The tuning preview, if you click this slider and pop this out, we can actually bring this down a little bit. Sometimes things can be really jolting when you're grabbing a wrong note or something that's kind of, harsh in general. L key for the level display. L key. This brings you in and out of the level display. It's timeline locked, so if you're at a certain point, like here in the level, and you go over here, this will bring you in and out. If you wanted to emphasize a breath, this breath right over here, if I wanted this to be super loud, it meant that my de-essers weren't working as hard. It meant that my compressors weren't working as hard. It meant that if I had a pop track or something that was like a folk track, and I went too heavy on the compression on the way in, I could really get a smooth, polished sounding track. Even when you take into consideration that we comp between different performances, certain performances might be 5 dB too loud. Hopefully we adjust these as we go when we're comping, but sometimes we don't. This type of fine level detail work, it's so easy to do in Revoice, and it's so easy to visualize it. And one of the other things I like, if we take a look at this in a DAW and we're using clip gain, you have to make a highlighted selection, and then you're pulling it down, and sometimes you have this kind of like steep line in terms of automation where you have like a 5 dB drop where all of a sudden it's quieter, and then you sometimes have to try to smooth it out. If I drop this down, it takes care of everything. It takes care of everything in between here. So if I solo, if I wanted to bring this down a little bit more, I never feel like I've taken a chunk of something and it's been lopped off and decreased 10 dB, and then that they're blocked back together beside each other and it's jolting or jarring. We can still grab and adjust and make level changes for any unpitched voicings. In the case where I do my first pass of tuning, this might be the easier approach to grab, but maybe only if something really stands out. Like if that really stands out, and I'm just going to do a little bit. I'll just do a click, hold, and drag.
Make me feel something.
So that sounds good. Keep moving.
Make me feel something and not feeling nothing at all.
This breath, way too loud. Bring it down.
Nothing at all.
But I always bring breaths down in context of the track. I never bring breaths down in solo.
Nothing at all.
Okay,
Nothing.
so if we go back.
I'm tongue-tied, 'cause I'm busy trying to read.
So this one over here, you get the idea. This is a brilliant way to be able to make adjustments. Now, one other thing I do want to make mention of is that when I do my first pass of tuning, I always make sure that this is locked. In the top right over here, I horizontally lock this, because what that means is that this tool over here, it is a pitch tool. No matter where I grab it, it is a pitch correction tool. If this is deselected, then we have a multi-tool where we can adjust the timing of these individual ones over here. And you can also just click, hold, and drag. If you want to adjust the timing of one note, I can just click, hold, and drag to reposition this. If I just kind of want to like slip this and edit this, I can just click this and drag it. That being said, I definitely prefer to do a first pass of tuning only, where I will lock this and then I will go back and do the other one. Before I forget, because I've tried to answer this question 4 times and I keep confusing myself and digressing, if we switch over to the warp point tool, which we can get to by pushing the period key, I want to show this, because this is what's really interesting, what's happening kind of behind the scenes. If I push the period key, take a look at all the warp points that have been added. If you wanted to use the warp point tool that you wanted to make adjustments to, and if you wanted to add or remove any of these, or you wanted to make any changes like this way, in terms of like, if you much prefer to use this tool, you could make multiple adjustments with the warp point tool. Since we have the ability to do it from the selector tool, I'm just simply multi-selecting things and using the selector tool. Make sure that I unlock this right over here. I'm just using it like this because for me it's so much easier to visualize. I can instantly hear it and I don't have to worry about anything being locked down or changed. If we do something that could be really complex, it doesn't look complex. We can just make a change by highlighting something. In the background, it is complex. There's a lot of stuff going on, but in terms of how we use it, it's very practical. Same with level changes, same with like the fact that this is being separated and everything. Become an expert in your DAW that you use in terms of like the basics. And when I say the basics, I mean there's really only two things. You need to know how you send your audio to Revoice Pro. And then once it lands in Revoice Pro, you need to know, how do I send my audio? Once I've done my work, how do I send it back? I will completely separate the aspect of everything that's happening in my DAW. And then this is polishing, this is finessing, this is finalizing. When you're in an ARA-based DAW, or really even if you're using the streaming that's available now with the Revoice Pro link, that you can play everything in context of your DAW, and you can be listening to the results that are happening in Revoice. So you don't have to render right away. But I will always recommend rendering, because at the end of the day, I want to commit to this and I want to consolidate and bake in these changes that I'm making. So once I'm happy with everything, I would probably do a save as, where I have like, and it might be called vocals rendered or something, but I would still maybe leave myself a version of my session. And also you can save, if you're working in Revoice and you want to actually save a Revoice Pro session, you could save that session. You could even put it in your session folder of your DAW if you want to be able to recall that and open them and be able to make changes later on. At the end of the day, I'm always going to commit to any changes that I've made in Revoice. I always want them to be in the final version, and I don't want to have the potential of anything not recalling properly. I'm just going to commit to it, and it'll be as if though it was recorded that way and it was the perfect vocal that was recorded perfectly. I already might have reverb, I might have delay, I might have widening, effects, compression, EQ, dynamics, de-essing, lots of saturation, lots of processing. So I can make a change and immediately hear the final results in my timeline. But there's also something to be said about needing to be able to listen to things that are dry. You're not able to hide behind any reverb. You're not able to hide behind a delay or a chorus or anything like that. So there's something to be said about using just a dry chain where you have nothing, and I'm listening to the raw tracks, but I always need to listen to my reference. So for me, the reference is absolutely 100% ideal, and I will use that regardless of what I'm doing. I will always pull in a reference because I need to hear a reference. If I'm tuning, I need to hear a reference if I'm time aligning or making any changes to the pocket. I need to hear a reference if I'm listening to a stack of 4 different vocals. So I would always advise, even if you're working in an ARA DAW, I would always advise bringing in an instrumental. Export it out of your DAW, like export it, bring it back in, and then get it sent over to Revoice. So we already know what we can sound like in terms of our polished final output. I want to make sure that this is set to the proper output track. This is our lead vocal. We right click, we adjust pitch, timing, or level. Go full screen, come back to the beginning. So we've got lots of different ways that we can approach this. We can do a mix between using different tools, which is what I tend to generally do. For this one, let's pull up the K. For center notes, we can adjust the correction amount, but also we can adjust the drift. So maybe I can do a bit of a level adjustment in terms of straightening that out. And then also this is just great to just go across and get an average pitch center of where everything is going. If I'm taking a look at this one right over here, I might choose to use a cutter tool and first make a little bit of a separation. So I bring these into 2 notes. We'll have a quick listen.
I'm tongue-tied.
Okay, so this sounds a little bit better. It's not perfect yet. Let's fix the drift of this though. We're going to use the shaper tool. I'll right click. I'll use the shaper tool. If I click anywhere, notice we have those multiple points that have been added. We can click, hold, and drag, and we can reposition these from left to right if we need to move them. And we can make sure that these are anchored at the very ends. And then holding the alter option modifier, let's just try to straighten this out. I'm just going to kind of redraw this.
Tied.
Okay, if we want to listen to a before and after of where we are now, let's first make sure that these ones are in tune. If I wanted to use the correct notes tool, that's at 100%.
I'm tongue-tied.
Let's bring in our music as a reference.
I'm tongue-tied. 'Cause I'm...
Okay, this one right over here, we need to fix that. This is flat.
'Cause I'm...
Let's take this. We're just going to click, hold, and drag. And in this case, actually, what I'll do is I will lock the horizontal because I don't want to accidentally adjust the tuning. I just want to adjust this right over here. I'm click, holding, and dragging. Listen.
'Cause I'm...
This one here, again, just I can use this to make sure that it's at 100%. I could select both of these and I could use this correction amount to make sure that they're at 100.
'Cause I'm...
Now, this looks really, really jagged. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can approach fixing this. One way would be that we could just right click and let's use a draw tool. This is something that was inherited from Repitch. If I just say, well, I would want it to sound like that in a perfect world, it's cheating. And I would probably first aim to get this to sound better. But if I wanted to do it quickly, okay, that doesn't sound bad at all. Now we have another tool. We can flatten out what's already there as a starting point, or we can also just grab the shaper tool. We can add some multiple points, and we can just attempt to kind of drag some of these lines to reposition them. What is better for, I got a really quick comment there. I'm going to try to answer the comments in real time. Okay, go back to the beginning, pull this down a little bit. We'll take a quick listen to these. This one here.
I'm tongue-tied.
There.
I'm tongue-tied.
We can multi-select two pitch blocks beside each other, and then if we right-click, we can smooth join. Where is it over here? The key is the M key. You can use it multiple times. If you have two things that you're connecting and they sound a little bit jagged, you push it once. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Watch what happens when I keep pushing it. Look at how it just kind of morphs itself into something that it just kind of smooths it out over and over and over.
I'm tongue-tied, 'cause I'm busy trying to reach you.
Okay, this one over here.
I'm tongue-tied, 'cause I'm busy.
This one, let's get these notes there. Busy trying to. This one. Now this one, I'm going to separate this. We'll go to the cutter tool. Let's say somewhere about there. That automatically puts the tail as she swoops up. It kind of leaves that where it needs to be in terms of being in a natural position. And then I would just potentially use the correction slider.
Busy trying to reach my butt.
Okay, that one we went flat, so let's listen to this.
My butt.
This one, there's a number of different ways that we could approach this, right? If this had any drift issues, we could pull up the correct notes tool. We could just adjust this drift, get that as good as a starting point. More and more though, for these types of issues, I'm using the shaper tool all the time now because I can create these points. Keep in mind, clicking once, it'll add multiple ones, but if you hold the Alt Option modifier, you can click to add them just where you need them. When you add these shape points just exactly where you need them, now if you hold the Alt Option modifier, you lock down the point before and after, and you can just finesse this into place. Also, you can highlight either across on the top or you can highlight on the bottom, and then I can just pull this down a little bit. Let's pull this one down. Let's pull this one up.
My butt.
And now its tuning is a little off, so we could go to the selector tool. Whoops, I had multiple ones selected there. This one here. Mind, but I. Okay, this one looks pretty morphed and looks pretty weird. We could try to fix it with the shaper tool. Again, this is something it's a unique way to work where we can make these adjustments. We can also use a combination of things. So maybe I wanted to straighten some of this out with the shaper tool, but then I could just hop over to the draw tool and I could say, right, what transition did I want to have happen? Well, I would have wanted that, and I would have wanted this to be something like that. Then we go back to the selector tool and I can just click. And I tune a lot by ear. I actually prefer that. This might be a little much on the modulation. We can kind of chill this out a little bit or flatten this out. Let's go back.
Busy trying to reach my butt. I'm tongue-tied, 'cause I'm busy trying to reach my butt.
Okay, and the changes that we made.
I'm tongue-tied, 'cause I'm busy trying.
Now also, the smooth join tool, I mentioned how it's really awesome. It's a really unique tool. Sometimes if something isn't sounding the way I want it to, I'll just hit it a couple times and it just kind of like, it's cheating. It just kind of smooths things out even more.
I'm tongue-tied.
Okay, so listen to that note now. Listen to this word. I'm tongue-tied. You know how it went sharp before? This is where we were.
I'm tongue-tied.
It swooped up, but listen to it now.
I'm tongue-tied, 'cause I'm.
Now this note over here, if we listen to the before.
'Cause I'm.
Now, I may have gone a little too aggressive, but if you zoom in, you see this gray pitch trace that's happening in the background. This is where we were with this note before, and this is where we are after. I'm basically using a mix between different tools. A lot of the times I'll switch between automated tools and actual manual tools. And the interesting thing in terms of how I approach tuning with Revoice Pro and with Repitch is whereas it used to be something where I would say to myself, all right, I'm 100% manual, which meant every single one of these, if I listen,
Gotta talk to you.
got to talk to you. I used to think of this as it was either manual or it was automatic. With Repitch and with Revoice Pro 5, you can do both. So if I wanted to do something where I'm like, okay, let's use the correction. I'll just use the correction sliders to kind of see where the software is averaging out the pitches. But then if I need to redraw something and I say to myself, oh, this transition's pretty messy, well, then I'll just hop over to the draw tool and I can just redraw that transition. If I wanted to make a quick adjustment on just using the same natural pitch trace that I have, but leveling this off a bit. And then once it's leveled, I want to do that. And then if I want to smooth these out together, a smooth join, it's just a really interesting way to be able to work. Go a little bit further.
Maybe we could run and hide.
Okay, so that one, I wanted to make some adjustments here. Same thing again. So I'll just go over to the draw tool. Draw tool is really kind of like a get out of jail free card sometimes. If I wanted to readjust something and I wanted to pay attention to what is already there, and the goal with the pitch correction in terms of the brief that I get is make this sound as natural as possible, then I'm going to lock down some shaper tool nodes and I'm going to make some adjustments here. I can put a point there, put a point here, make these adjustments, pull this down a little bit. Because if I was to use this main selector tool and I was to flatten this out, it's going to flatten out everything together. But what about the cases where I want to move certain pitch points in terms of like this peak is too high or this peak is too high, but this one is okay? Then I can tweak this to my heart's content just by selecting these individual points and saying, right, I only want these ones. Or maybe I want to put a pitch point here and I want to bring this up, and then maybe all of these now need to come a little bit down. You can just morph this into place using all these tools, the draw tool, the shaper tool, the center notes tool. If you're used to a certain workflow where you use, let me see if I can find an example that would be good. Let's say that you're used to a very specific type of software and you say to yourself, no, I want to work with the cutter tool. That's how I'm happy. Then that's fine. You can choose the cutter tool. You can make these separations right over here. And if you wanted to level this out in a way that would be how you're used to doing it in other software, you can still work this way. You could click any one of these points. You could either double click them to snap them to like 100%. And then you could say, okay, well, that's where it is here. And then guess what? We could give the smooth join tool a try. Just select all these areas. Let's try to get that to sound good.
Loud.
Okay, in isolation.
Loud.
Well, that's not too bad, right? We'll listen to the before.
Loud.
So we dropped off when we went up, but if we listen in, it really depends on how you work, but I would definitely advise checking out some of these. The biggest tip I can give for smooth join tool is if you select multiple blocks and you hit it and it kind of does what you want, hit it 10 times and see whether it fixes the issue you're talking about. If you don't like it, undo it. Create a match process with Smart Pitch. I'm going to zoom in. Let's have a listen to these tracks together.
Yes, I need somebody like you. Need somebody like you.
Okay, if we listen to the female lead vocal and let's listen to the male.
Yes, I need somebody like you. Need somebody like you. Need somebody.
And in context of the instrumental.
Yes, I need somebody like you. Need somebody like you. Need somebody.
See, this is why the instrumental is important, because sometimes if you're hearing them against each other, you don't have any like objectivity of like, oh, that's out or this is out. But when you hear everything together, you can hear things poking out of the pocket that don't really sound right. So the idea here is that you have a lead vocal, and let's just say that you're happy with the tuning in terms of all of this, regardless of how it was tuned. If I bring this up and I adjust this, that I'm super happy with that, and that is my end goal, and that's where I'm leaving off with my tuning. We'll click the B key. This brings up our new process panel. I want to match the timing and pitch of the female lead vocal to the male. We're going to work with selected audio. We'll choose a preset that works. We don't need to create a process group because it's only one match process that we're creating. Lead vocal is our guide, which is our female track. Male vocal is the dub track. And let's go ahead and create this new process. It generates a brand new output track. Just take a look at the track name. Anytime you see the brackets with out in capitals, this is going to be a output that Revoice Pro created. So in this case, this is a match process output. Now, if I want to listen to this in isolation, I can obviously just solo this out. Another tip is Alter Option Soloing will unsolo any other tracks and it'll solo just the one that you're interested in working with. This blue block area over here, this little drop down menu, if we click this, this will open up the process panel for this match process. This is the preset that we used as a starting point. These are the settings. We have tight timing and we have tight pitch. This is super aligned. We're using the tightest possible alignment in timing and pitch. We can back off of the timing a little bit. When I do that, if I back off of the timing, take a look at this. See these changes that we have. If I bring the timing back in, we have all of these timing changes that have been added. I can bring this down. This is super tight right now, but I could back off a little bit. It'll be tighter than what it was, but maybe it won't sound as perfectly aligned in terms of timing. Also, we could do the same in terms of the actual pitch. Whoops, I did that for the pitch. We can do the same thing with either one of these where we can adjust. And we're getting this just to the point where it sounds good for everything. I didn't hear any issues for the female lead vocal, so that's it. That is now done. If we were working in an ARA-based DAW, this is a unison right across the board. I could have also used match all to guide because they're both unisons, but we're going to go with match unison only. You can see the pitch traces from the before and after. Actually, in some points, it's quite a drastic difference. If we zoom in these areas here, I could give this a really quick play, the before and after of how this sounds. We will select this track over here, select the B key. With respect to the actual length, most times this is going to be selected audio. If you just wanted to do a specific section, you could make a highlighted range selection, and this changes to selected playback range. But I think in most cases, you want this to be selected audio. In terms of this one now, again, match timing, pitch, and unison. Our lead vocal is our guide. Our male vocal is our dub. Let's go ahead. We don't need to worry about a process group for this. And let me make sure quickly that I'm not leaving anything out. So let me bring my visibility in for this. Let's have a listen to this one.
We can run and hide.
I'm going to bring this track in.
We can run and hide. Get a little drunk.
Okay, so for this now, we have something that's slightly different. Which headphones are you using? Oppo PM3s. Oppo PM3, closed back, no longer made, but they are the flattest headphones I've ever heard in my life, and they are perfect frequency response for me.
Maybe we can run and hide.
Okay, so now we have a high vocal unison.
Maybe we can run.
But listen to the center
Get a
part.
little drunk on my soul. I have the guts to speak this out loud, loud.
Okay, so let's break down exactly what's different about this. In this example, we have our main lead vocal, which is our female lead vocal, which we've done our tuning and we've done our pocketing. It's perfectly in time with the music. It sounds good to us. Then we have our male lead vocal, which is a unison track, and that's quite out in terms of timing and tuning. We don't want to have to work on that twice. We're going to use the female lead vocals as a guide for timing and tuning. But this third track that we see over here, this is the curveball. If we listen to this,
maybe we can run and hide.
Listen to it in isolation.
Maybe we can run and hide.
This part,
Get a little drunk.
that's a harmony. If we listen to that against the lead,
Get a little drunk on my soul. I have the guts.
and then it jumps back to being an octave unison. So this is one of the scenarios that you might find yourself in, where it's not, you don't just need to have just a tuning or just a timing. Also, if we listen to this, the tuning, it's not bad, but it's not perfect.
Get a little drunk.
If we listen to the high part,
Maybe we can run and hide.
that's a little flat, that note. Let's just say that I want that tuning to be perfect, but let's listen to the tuning of the harmony.
Get a little drunk on my soul.
I would like that to be tuned as well. So let's now go back to where we were. Let's create a match process. We'll click the B key. This time it's going to be slightly different. So we're going to go with the match timing, pitch, or level. That makes sense. Now for the length, let's go with selected audio. Now, in terms of the presets, if you go to factory presets, these three ones that are down here, make sure that I'm looking at the proper ones. I'm going to match, it's going to be tight timing plus pitch. We're going to match unison, and the unison can be an octave up or an octave down. That doesn't matter. And it will tune the harmony. Because keep in mind, remember that center section that we listened to, we had a harmony. It wasn't in perfect tune. So I want to tune that. We don't necessarily need a tuning reference though. We don't need a guide because we could just say tune to the nearest semitone. If I didn't want to tune that harmony part at all, then I could just go tight timing plus pitch and match only unison. Let's do both actually. So first of all, we'll start with this one. And then for the settings, we want to make sure that we have high vox harm added as one of the dub tracks as well. So with high vox harm, which is our female harmony, let's add that to the dubs. Now I'm going to create a new process. This is now rendered two output tracks. We have our female lead, and we have our male lead vocal. Let's hear the original.
Get a little drunk on wine, so.
And now if we want to listen to the male lead vocal output, we go to male vocal out, and we listen to that.
Get a little drunk on wine, so.
It fixed the timing, and it also tuned it according to this. If we listen to the two of those together, it followed it perfectly. Let's take a listen to the high vox harm output. If we listen to that on its own, I didn't do any tuning on that one. I didn't use that smart pitch mode, but I did do time alignment and tuning that goes for the lead unison.
Maybe we can run and hide.
Perfect.
Get a little drunk on my soul.
Tuning.
I have the guts to speak this out loud, loud.
So our time alignment is now perfect. That lead vocal unison, that's an octave up, that is now sitting perfectly in terms of timing against the lead vocal that we have. let's tweak that preset. So I'm going to go to the match process, and let's open that up for a second. And in terms of match unison only, I'm going to move this slightly out of the way. And let me also, I'm trying to zoom my screen so that we can see the high Vox harm output. If we now change the smart pitch mode on this, I'm going to change it from match unison only to match unison and tune non-unison. What this will do is for anything that's a unison, which is this beginning part and this end part, it will match the tuning and the timing because it's a unison. And it doesn't matter if it's female vocal, male vocal, different octaves, different ranges, because it's using the nearest octave as a target mode. That's all worked out. But now match unison and tune non-unison, it is now going to tune this, which was a little bit out. So let's go match and tune. See what just happened there. Take a look at this. These notes right over here. When I take this off, these ones, they're out. Their tuning was out right over here. But if I bring this in, now that tunes it. So now we have kind of like the perfect results, right? We have our lead vocal. We'll bring in our music. We'll bring in our male lead vocal, and we'll bring in our high harmony. So the last thing I would probably do here is, that all sounds great, but I need to make a level adjustment. The levels on both the female lead vocal and the male lead vocal right over here, they're too loud. So we already know how to do that from a previous video. We could go to our match process, and this is what our lead vocal, our adjust, we'll edit our time and pitch. And now I'd probably click the L key, and I would select all of these, and then I could just bring them down. And now if we go back, let's hear if this blends a little bit better. We'll play from here.
Maybe just to share.
And at that point, if I did make any level changes and I was happy with them, we could actually open up the match process. And in addition to having the timing and pitch, we could say like, all right, well, I want to adjust the level too. I want the levels to be followed. Take a look at what just happened with our male lead vocal out. Because we made those changes to the level on the guide track in terms of just their level, and this could be sibilance, but also the general level, if you pulled something down by 3 dB, we could then take that level change that we made, and we could apply that. So now look at how loud these are. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Look how loud these are. And if I engage I need to go a little bit over. If I engage level, take a look at what happens. It brings them down. And then you also have varying different degrees of how you could do this. You could keep the dub's average level, or you could kind of split the difference between these, but an extremely awesome and powerful way that we have to work with this. Let me give the Cole's notes on smart pitch. You can use timing and pitch, both of these, as a starting point now. Before, you used to always have to choose. Do I want timing, or do I want timing and pitch? If you needed the timing of a lead, you would have to first tune the track and then time align it. And you'd have to render either one of those before you did the next step. If we choose timing and pitch, if we choose one of these two modes over here, either match unison only or match unison and tune non-unison, this is a very magic combination, and it can intelligently detect if something's not a unison. It will either leave it alone if it's match unison only, or it will tune it to the nearest semitone if it's this. Also worth mentioning that if it does tune it to the nearest semitone, but let's say the actual performance that the artist laid down was maybe a little bit out and you need to make an adjustment to it, that's okay, because at any given point of time, we can click an output track. And if you do want to make tunings to an output track, we can adjust the tuning of an output track simply by going to simply by making it an adjust process, and then we can offset the tuning, but it will lock the whole entire match process, so that you only want to do that as a very last step. If I don't want to have that applied, any tuning or processing, I just right click, reset selected notes, and we reset all changes. It'll change it back to where it was in its starting point. So that's kind of like a get out of jail free card if you ever need to make any adjustments. Could you use an octave down version of the female voice to create a decent version of the male voice? If you have a male voice and you have a different octave, as long as it has the pitch, if your match process is in nearest octave mode, which I think most of the new presets are that are included, that's magic. It will adjust if it's a male voice versus a female voice. If it's a different octave range, it will take care of everything. The other thing, though, is that's something I'm going to take a look at showing right now, is that we can adjust the formants of things. And this is actually one area why I like to use Revoice a lot, is that if I'm making any adjustments to formants or anything like that, I will sometimes work with an artist and we might mock things up by using something like Little Altar Boy or some type of thing that allows us to apply a real-time formant shift onto an actual track. And that's a good starting point. I think formants are very useful either for getting things to sound natural or on the other side, to getting them to sound completely unnatural. If you have a lead vocal that you've done some tuning, let's start with this.
Guess I need somebody like you.
So I've done a tuning
Need
pass.
somebody like you. Need somebody like you. You again.
If you have anything that you've tuned and you're happy with that, let's say that for these ones here,
You.
these harmonies or these lines over here, let's say that I wanted to have an offset on the formant. If I go to the adjust A0, which is the audio region name, if I right click and I scroll to edit shift of formants, notice that we have this line. If I click, I can add a point. Let's add a couple points. I'm going to add multiple points. We'll lock down some before and we'll lock down some after. If I click, hold, and drag, I can offset this. Notice that this just changed something. Click, hold, and drag this one. I can offset this. I can pull this down. We can highlight multiple ones and adjust them together if we want to. You can adjust these together. If you wanted to get rid of these points, you highlight them. We can right click. We have delete selected values, and this will get rid of those. I'm going to just add some nodes, and I can make an adjustment. So I'll add one here, and then I'm going to lock down. So we click the first one, we hold shift, and we click the second one. We make sure that both of these are selected like this. And now I can pull this down, and now I'll just have this effect happening over the line, the vocal.
Guess I need somebody like you.
That could be something that you do maybe on a double, like you bring it in and you do completely different processing. And that is something that you could do across the board, or it's something that you could automate. If you only wanted it in certain spots, maybe you want to get rid of this, you could right click and we have the option to delete selected values. And then this kind of goes from being a normal formant down to lower. So this is now kind of halfway into the note that we have that formant shift.
Body like you.
I like using these types of things. You hear it a lot in some modern pop. I know Dua Lipa does it a lot. That's actually where I kind of first started to hear it and actually like it. So the formant shifts are a really cool thing to be able to do. You can select these points over here that we have. If you've created stuff and you don't like it, we can just right click and we'll just delete selected values. There's two ways you can approach this. Let's add a track. And then I'm going to hold down shift and option. If we click, we get this little icon. We drag and drop. This gives us a little dialog window. Just go with original time code. Now we end up having two vocals, and essentially they're the exact same thing. This vocal over here, this is a rendered or baked in version of this lead vocal track. So what I want to do is I want to create some tuning changes that we make on this one, and I want to actually synthesize or create a harmony. I don't want to necessarily do it across the whole thing. And I think in general, it's not good to overdo harmonies, but we'll start this process. First of all, make sure that your track header is always pulled out so that you can see your full track name. Give it a name and give it a name of what it is. If it's a lead vocal, it's a lead vocal. If it's a lead vocal high harmony, call it high harm. If it's stereo pairs, call it high harm L, high harm R. You'll get confused very quickly if you're not naming things. The next step is full screen on this because we're going to do some tuning, but I also want to make mention of 3 shortcuts. This is track 1, track 2, track 3. After I actually name this track and push enter to solo all of these, any one of them at a single time, like this, 1 and 2. So if I have the harmony soloed and I'm in full screen mode, I can bring in the lead in and out by clicking this shortcut. I just want to make sure that people know how I'm doing this. With the harmony soloed, let's go full screen, and then we can right click and we'll adjust timing, pitch, or level. This will allow us to make an actual adjustment to this. I'm going to temporarily restrict this tuning to just tuning movement. We do have scales that we can adjust here. You click where it says all notes. If you click scales, you have the option to click the scale, or you also have an option to click there's a scale detection key. It's a shortcut. So if you click the detect scale option, it's automatically detected the scale. When it does show the scale though, it will automatically kind of filter out the notes that are in the key versus out of the key. That being said, I always work in chromatic. I want to have these notes droning, and also I want these harmonized. This one over here and this one. So the first thing I want to do is I need to determine how hard I want to tune these tracks. I'm okay with tracks that are harmony tracks. I often will actually hard tune those. I'm going to fix a couple issues first though, because I see some stuff that's coming up. I can see that this, I want to make an adjustment. I'm going to use the draw tool for this. So for this, let's just use the draw tool and we'll do this like that. This is now fixed this issue. I could smooth this out a little bit more if I wanted. And I'm going to scroll along and I'm going to see if there's any more areas that are like jagged. So this one over here, again, we'll do something like this. This one, looks like we have a couple issues here. Let's take this. This one, I'm going to pull it down. And let's use our draw tool, which I tend to use a lot. We'll use this, and also for this.
Like you.
This one here, this tapers off, goes low. We'll fix that. And then last but not least, let's grab this one. Couple ways that we could approach this, right? We could use the tuning methods, we could use a draw, we could use a shaper tool. In these cases here, if we wanted to use the center notes tool, like fixed drift and stuff, I'm just doing this quick and dirty because I know what my intent is, and it's actually going to be hard tuning. I'll probably make a decision, an executive decision, just for sake of demonstration here, that I want to select all of these pitches, these lower ones right over here, every single one. And if we zoom in, I'm going to grab the top of the pitch trace modulation, and I'm going to flatten things out. I don't want them to be completely flat, but with them all selected, let's have a listen. I just need to know which note that I want to hit. So I have an idea in mind. So we haven't tuned anything yet. This is where we're sitting for the main lead vocal of this chorus. So let's just make a highlighted selection, and then if you hold Alt or Option with multiple events selected, or multiple pitch blocks, let's see what this sounds like.
Guess I need somebody,
Okay, now let's hear it with the lead vocal though, because that's what matters.
guess I need somebody,
Okay, I'm going to pull this note down a bit, and also we can just kind of flatten this out. The next section is I want to take care of these harmonies. I'm gonna click the 1 key because the lead is soloed in the background, and we need to land on some pitches that harmonize. Okay, so this is where we're going. These notes are the ones that we're harmonizing against. Okay, so we're gonna go this one, I think. Let's play this together now. I'll bring the lead in. We'll go out of full screen. Let's bring the lead in. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Let's go back into full screen and let's make similar changes to these ones. What about this one? Okay, so for this, I think that this one here, if I play the two of these together, so that one works. And then the end one, I think that's the exact same as the beginning one. Let's go back here. What did we have? We have F sharp to G down to F sharp. So I'm using Shift Command, and I'm click holding and dragging. I'll select all three of these, and this is going to be, we can also hold the Alt Option modifier, which will snap to the position. And then these two together, we'll play this in context with the lead vocal. As a safety net, let me go full screen for a moment. Let's click the L key to just bring ourselves into levels, and let's pull everything that happens after that. Let's just pull the levels 100% down. We'll come out of full screen. So now if we listen to the two of these together, what we should get, we'll click L again, is we should have two vocals that are harmonizing. We need to pull these up to the same pitch, which we ended up landing on a B4. So we'll click this one, and then it'll be the same thing for these ones over here. So these,
guess I need somebody,
but it only matters in terms of how it sounds together.
guess I need somebody like you.
This one,
Somebody like you. Need somebody like you.
if you just need like one harmony track that you wanted to bring in, you could leave it at that if you wanted to. Let's take a listen in context. And I need to bring this down in terms of level. I need to bring it down a bit. Let's try around minus 3.6. I'm going to go full screen on the harmony, and we can right click and we can go to the adjust, and we can edit the shift performance. From here, we need to make a decision. Do we want to go lower or higher?
Guess I need somebody like you. Need somebody
Okay, I'm going to just make a choice to lock down some points. We need to get at least the before and the afters. And if I select all these points, I can grab the formant and I can pull everything down a little bit. And this will now change the sound of this harmony.
Guess I need somebody like you.
So undo.
Guess I need somebody.
And redo.
Guess I need some.
It really matters though in terms of how it sounds in context.
Guess I need somebody like you.
We could even have it where these sections have a different formant offset, because we can create these nodes, right? We create these nodes, we come up with something that we're happy with. Now, this is, for me, anytime that I create harmonies, I really like to have harmonies, or I like to think to myself, if I recorded this and I was actually doing the vocal production for the session and I recorded this session, I would record those in stereo pairs. So I don't want to have to repeat all that work that I was doing. So what I'll do instead is I'm going to create a doubler, but I already have one track and it's following the timing and we've adjusted the tuning. So we have a harmony that sits well in context. So let's now create a mono doubler and let's just pan these out because that's exactly how I would do this if I recorded this in real time. So I'm going to right click and actually we'll make sure that this is selected. We'll click the B key. This time, instead of matching timing, pitch, or level, I'm going to create a doubler. In terms of the actual length, we don't need it to be the selected audio. We only need it, we only made the changes from here to here. So let's click and drag to make a highlighted range selection. And this will give us now the duration of the doubler that we need. Like I said, it's going to be a doubler. We can zoom in a little bit here. Selected playback range. For the preset, I'm going to go with a factory preset. And let's go with, I like mono vocal mild, if I just want a mono doubler preset. Then we just need to set our input. Our input will be the harmony, which is right over here. And then our output, we'll just leave this to automatic. So when we create this new process, now what we've done is we've created an alternate version that has deviations in timing and in pitch of this track. So if we listen to both of these harmony tracks and we listen to them together, we'll listen to harmony and harmony out. Now we just need to pan these out, right? So I'll pan this one hard left, pan this one hard right. If we take this out of solo, we listen to everything together. If we wanted to make any tweaks, we could make a shift of the formants. We could come back into our adjust layer and we could edit the shift of formants and we could tweak this if we wanted to. So that is one approach that we have. And with that approach, we have basically, we've created a vocal harmony, and then we're randomizing it and we're making some changes in terms of getting the pitch. We can tune it as aggressive or as loose as we want. And then we're using the formant shift to either make it sound way more natural or way more artificial, according to whatever we want. And then the last step is just creating a mono doubler, which gives us a stereo version of that. Now, but like I said, at the end of the day, if we play the lead and the harmony against each other, at the end of the day, these are going to be, in terms of their timing, they're 100%, they're exact. This has been panned out hard left, but if we return this back to where it was.
Yes, I need somebody like you.
There is one other approach that you could take, though, and it would potentially offer even more flexibility. I would potentially consider highlighting these formant shifts that we've created. I could right-click and delete these. Maybe I want to leave this as the starting point for the tuning. I'm completely happy with that. Let's open up this doubler process that we have. Let's change it from mono vocal mild. Let's go to our factory presets, and let's change it to stereo vocal mild. Watch what happens with this waveform when I change to stereo vocal mild. This is now going to change into a stereo doubler output. Now in this case, we only used the harmony track that we manually created. We only use that as a starting point, but our end goal is that we actually use this track.
Guess I need somebody, but
we actually use that as the actual starting point. Let me take this out for a moment.
guess I need somebody like you.
We have our tuning that we need to adjust. This was at right, so it followed the tuning.
Guess I need somebody.
The other thing that we could do, though, is we can do the form and adjust. We could actually make something different. So channel 1 is our left side of the doubler. We could say, all right, what's our average delay? 25 might be a bit much. So maybe we can bring this down a little bit. So let's go to we'll go to 13. And then the form and shift, maybe this one is low. And then on the right channel, let's go to, what is it at, 34? That's a lot. Let's bring that up a bit. And then on the right side, maybe our formant is going to be high. And then this offers like a new style of a doubler.
Guess I need somebody.
And then together with the track,
Guess I need somebody, but
and then in context of everything.
guess I need somebody like you.
And then in that case, we actually don't need this harmony track. We can mute it.
Guess I need somebody like you. Somebody like you.
Now, these types of things, when you do them properly, at least in my opinion, if you taper them into the mix, they can add a big difference. And if they're not being listened to under a microscope or in isolation, they're a beautiful layer that we can add. So I would potentially even pull that down a little bit further, maybe like -5 or 6. Now, watch what happens when I mute this in and out. I'm going to engage my loop mode and let's play.
Guess I need somebody like you. Somebody like you. Somebody like you.
I think that's a great sounding result in terms of creating a vocal harmony that is realistic sounding. It's a really good starting point, and it's transparent. And if you want it to be the opposite of transparent, you could make it as untransparent as you want. If you're in an ARA DAW, you can press play in your DAW, and you're hearing everything that's playing back from Revoice in your timeline. That being said, you can also set up the Revoice Pro monitor plugin, where this is an option that we have right over here. Where as long as you have Revoice Pro link active and you have, Revoice Pro monitor is here. I'm sorry, I apologize. You need to be seeing my screen too. In the bottom right over here, we have the option to connect audio output from this window to the Revoice Pro monitor plugin. If you play back audio from your DAW and you instantiate an instance of Revoice Pro monitor, you can have it such that your audio can stream into like they can talk to each other, but you have to make sure that you would then mute any track so that they're not doubling up in terms of playback. We do have some awesome new integration though too with the VST version of the new Revoice Pro Link plugin. We have like real-time streaming, which was previously only possible with ARA plugins, where if you play back in your DAW's timeline, which like I said could be through all your different compressors, EQs, delays, anything, then you would also be hearing you have the ability to play back in your DAW, but you're playing the rendered or the processed outputs of Revoice Pro, but you're playing them in your DAW's timeline according to your signal chain. So that's super useful. We didn't used to be able to do that, so that's awesome. You multi-select all of the events that you want. You drag an instance of Revoice Pro Link from the Studio One editor, and then you click capture on one, and it will capture all of them across, and all of the events will come in. Naming your tracks, making sure your track headers are out, understanding where the outputs are created, understanding how to get to the tuning, understanding how to create a doubler, all these, tweaking the presets, everything. You are going to, and you start thinking to yourself, this is a standalone application, and I need to put a little bit of time invested into, it's going to pay back 100-fold. Once you start learning how to use it, once you get through the learning hurdle, you're fine. You're going to be laughing. If I ever did an extreme adjustment of a pitch shift, I would never do that on its own. I would do that. I would add a formant shift in there as well. I think I went through some of those examples. If ever you adjust like the pitch and it goes up like 5 or 6 semitones, I would then offset that with the formant change to offset that if I wanted it to be natural. Or if I wanted it to be the opposite, then I wouldn't care, or I would potentially add a formant change in the opposite direction. Revoice has a very specific place in my toolkit. It is my final layer of polish.